What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about the inclusion of AI in Battlefield 2042, or more commonly known as bots, and we are going to be discussing whether these new changes are good or bad for the game. I'm sure most of you probably have heard about this by now, but for those who haven't, I'll quickly give a rundown on everything that we know so far about the AI in the game and what their purpose is going to be, because there actually has been quite a bit of confusion on the topic so far. The initial announcement about these AI soldiers was at the early reveal event for the game, which took place about a week before you guys got to see the initial trailer, and at this event the devs first mentioned that AI would be added to the game in order to make a more friendly environment for those who are maybe a little bit newer to the franchise or who just want to test a few things out before playing multiplayer. Daniel Berlin, the senior design director, mentioned to us that alongside the regular multiplayer modes like Conquest and Breakthrough, for example, there would also be the ability to play solo rather than playing against real players, meaning that you can actually play those exact same game modes but just against AI instead, or even with some friends against AI too. So there does seem to be essentially solo, co-op and multiplayer versions of the game modes that we've become accustomed to in the Battlefield franchise. Now, considering the fact that there is no campaign, I think this was definitely a good move on their part, because some people do just like to play Battlefield for its offline modes like the campaign or even the test range, and while the very large majority of players do buy the game for multiplayer, it's always important to have something for everyone. This is going to be really helpful for anyone who's not really played Battlefield before, or maybe they're even a little bit newer to shooters in general, and that just means they won't have to be thrown straight into the deep end and play against 10-year veterans and just people who play the game every day, because we all know how frustrating that can be when you're new, and it can honestly just make or break a game for a lot of people. So letting players just play at their own pace seems to be very important from what DICE have told us. Now, about a week or so after the actual reveal of the game, Daniel Berlin was on the Xbox stream where he went into depth even further about the AI, and this is where a lot of the confusion actually came into this discussion, as he mentioned something that we didn't actually know about prior to this little interview. He mentioned that AI will actually be included in regular multiplayer as well, at a maximum of 64 bots in a game, to try and allow lobbies to feel fuller when they are in fact slightly empty, since obviously the maps are enormous, and if there's a new lobby that only has, say, 10 players instead of 128 on a map that's the size of a battle royale map, then obviously that's just going to be super boring while you're waiting for the lobby to populate. So in these instances, AI will actually be running around and playing in those regular multiplayer lobbies. A lot of people in the community were definitely not too happy about this, and I can definitely understand why at face value. We all play multiplayer to play against real players, and if we wanted to play against bots, then obviously we'd just go and play the solo mode. So I can definitely understand why players were mad, and I for one can't really stand when there are bots in multiplayer modes. So on some level I do agree with those people, but there is a little bit more to it than that. As the lobby begins to populate, real players will actually replace those AI soldiers, meaning if the lobby has 100 players, then there'll be 28 bots instead of 64. So when a lobby is actually populated, the bots will become less and less involved, and obviously if the lobby has 128 out of 128 players, there won't be any bots in the game. It'll just be 100% real players, and will only gain AI soldiers if people begin to quit. DICE have said that their reasoning for this is a few different things, one being what I mentioned earlier, in that if there's only like 20 players in a lobby, if it's earlier in the day, or maybe it's just a new server that only popped up or something, well then that lobby won't feel empty while there aren't many players in it, and at such a low player count, most people kind of just mess around and practice a bit before the lobby fully populates anyways. So it's not like the AI will be interfering with some super intense game, since there's just not enough players at that point to make it intense in the first place. Their other reason, and this one being definitely the most important, was that it's really going to help the player base in those less populated areas of the world, such as my own country here in Australia, where often there's just not as many players online as there would be around the world. And so a lot of the time down here, when you try and play a game of Battlefield earlier in the day, or years after the game came out, like Battlefield 4 or Battlefield 1 for example, there's simply just not enough players sometimes to fully populate a lobby, and so after a while you genuinely just can't really play the game anymore, solely because there's not enough people online. With the addition of AI though, instead of joining the lobby that only has, say, 4 players in it, and then you're just walking around aimlessly doing nothing because there's only 2 guys on the other team, well, now there's going to be up to 64 AI soldiers to play alongside, and so for those players in those regions who just want to play the game despite the lower player count, well, now they can do that, even if it's not quite the same as a fully populated lobby, but it is definitely better than nothing. Now, living in a country like Australia, I can actually talk about this firsthand because I pretty much experience it with most games that I play. Early on in their lifespan, the player count is absolutely never an issue. I've never really played a game where it's just got no players online like a month after it comes out, and so when Battlefield 2042 first launches, this will never even be an issue, and I'll likely never even play in a lobby with AI soldiers for like a year after launch, because the player base will be really healthy when the game comes out. That means that if anyone is worried about the AI and they just don't want to play in those lobbies, well, they won't really have to, because there's always going to be full servers at the launch of the game game and for many months afterwards. So if I wanted to avoid the AI servers, for example, I'll just queue up on a server that already has 128 players, and then once I get in, there won't be any bots at all. 18 to 24 months later though, if the game has started to sort of die off a bit or something, but I'm still having fun with it and I want to play some more multiplayer, well, those bots are just going to really help those servers feel fuller and feel like the multiplayer that it used to be back when the game launched, rather than playing on an enormous map with like 13 players in the lobby and no one can even find each other. So overall, I think this is just a really good change that DICE have made, and this is coming from me, who was pretty public on my other channel in saying that I hated the supremacy mode in Battlefront 2 solely because of the bots. I generally just hate having bots in my multiplayer modes because that's not why I play multiplayer. So as much as I don't really want to play against bots, I'd definitely rather that than just having to give up on the game like 2 years down the track because I can't find any lobbies. And there are so many other places in the world that have these population issues as well, who are going to massively benefit from this implementation. For those of you who are really worried about this and you feel like it's going to negatively impact the game, don't worry about it at all, because like I said, when the game launches you might legitimately not see a single bot for like a whole year after the game comes out, simply because servers will always be full, and with the server browser system you can literally just choose to join those full lobbies every time you play and then avoid the AI altogether. For the newer and less experienced players, this also could be a great middle ground between the solo mode and the multiplayer as well, as those players might actually feel more comfortable playing in a lobby where there's only say 30 real players, for example, and then there'd be 64 bots. So for a lot of people, they might actually just choose to play these less populated lobbies for that reason, and so I see this as really just a win-win for everyone who plays the game. If you don't like AI, you can just choose to avoid those lobbies. If you want to play against players and AI, then you can choose to do that, and if you have no choice other than to just play against AI and a few players in those less populated areas, then I promise you that is definitely better than having to just play in lobbies where you can't even find a single person. Let me know what you guys think of these changes down in the comments though. I know a lot of people are going to be pretty torn on it, and so I'm definitely keen to hear what you guys think, as it is actually a pretty big change to the game moving forward. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new, then consider subscribing to the channel with those notifications on. Thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.